You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanders,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have Kate Bromley on the show with me, here to talk about her brand new book. It just released yesterday, and it's called Talk Bookish to Me. If you're a fan of books about writers, which is kind of a guilty pleasure for a lot of writers, this is a must read. It's so much fun, and I'm super excited to talk about it today. Welcome to the show, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Kate, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh, wow. I feel like for me, I was kind of late to the game. I feel like it wasn't until I really fell in love with romance novels and the whole romance genre, which was the summer after I graduated from high school. And that's when I discovered them at the library. My mom was like, I think you would like this. You should give it a chance. Let's give it a try. So we went to the library and I found one, that I thought looked good. And then I feel like my whole world, opened up when you go from being in school and being told kind of what you should read to then discover this genre, which was everything that I loved. I'd always loved romantic movies. So then to find all these books, and there were just thousands, hundreds of them at the library, and I just went on a bender, I guess, if you will. And I just haven't stopped. So it wasn't until I really fell in love with the genre and read so many that I started to wonder, could I do this? What would I write if I was a writer? And that was really when the thought popped into my head.
So I have to ask this, Kate, what surprised you about the genre, or what, or maybe I should say, what preconceived notions did you have about the genre that when you actually dug in and started reading in the genre surprised you?
Sometimes I think about it and I think it couldn't be possible, but I almost didn't know that they were there, that they existed. My mom, she always read fiction. My dad read fiction, and it just never even occurred to me until I was reading it, where I was like, oh my gosh, this exists and I love it so much. And I really didn't have any preconceived notions. I went into it kind of blind and then just fell head over heels, in love with it, that it was always about, women and kind of these amazing journeys that they went on and finding love in themselves. And I was just bewitched.
The romance genre has taken a fair amount of what's the word I'm looking for ridicule. Maybe that's not the right word, but people have made fun of people that read romance books before, and maybe has something to do with the history of the genre, or the state of publishing at one point or another. But what do you think gets unfairly bandied about the genre?
Probably just when people assume it's like smut, that it's just kind of, and that's what it's about, and that's all there is to it. When really it's all these amazing stories of self-discovery and coming into yourself, and there's just so much more to it, complex relationships, between partners, and it's just so all-encompassing. It's so much more than what people think just sometimes by looking at covers.
Yeah. Your books, and especially this book, is a romantic comedy. Why do you think those two, and of course, the romantic comedy is a staple of popcorn movies. I mean, the whole it keeps the whole movie industry afloat in a lot of years. But what do you think it is about those two things that merge so well, the romance and the comedy?
I think it's just a perfect pairing. Just as much as I love romance novels, like just straight romance, sometimes I think, what would make this more perfect except if I was, laughing, like if there were jokes or if there were funny situations. So it's like you take love and then you take humor, which humor so often leads to love. It just feels like they go hand in hand so perfectly.
Sure, sure. I know when my wife and I got together, we had been friends for a while before we ever dated, and one thing that we loved is we knew how to make each other laugh, and there's just something about a connection that forms when you can laugh with someone.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely. So you fell in love with the genre, and you eventually got to the point where you thought maybe I could try my hand at this. What was going on in your life at the time when you decided to start trying to write in the genre that you love so much?
At that point, I was a teacher. I was not at that point, but all in all, I was a nursery teacher for 7 years. So I was working full time and still just, reading through my lunch breaks and when I would get home and any chance I'd get. And it's so hard because I just never considered it an option. Like I always pictured writers as like these mythical creatures that, were able to achieve something that I could never achieve. So it wasn't even like a thought in my head, like or even in college to be like, "Oh, I love it. Maybe I should try to do it," because I just assumed, that wasn't for me. So it wasn't until I decided, well, let me just write a chapter for fun and see what I come up with. I wanted to just see what I could do. So I wrote a chapter and I gave it to my mom to read, and she was laughing and she thought it was so funny. So it was that encouragement, which then made me say, all right, like maybe I'll try another chapter. And I literally just went chapter by chapter, writing it and then giving it to my mom to read until the end, until there was a book.
What now was that book that you started with? Did that become Talk Bookish to me?
It was the earliest, most of an immature, I guess, version of it. The only thing that stayed is Kara's name and the fact
Wow.
that she was a writer. Everything else changed, but it was, I guess, definitely the starting point. But from there, as the years went on and I changed it so much, that was all her name and the fact that she was a writer.
So when you decided to try your hand at this, I love to hear about how things begin. Um, did the character of Kara, did she come to you, or did were you just thinking, like how did the idea for this story and these characters come about?
I think probably in the beginning, maybe I was trying to think of like how I would have liked my life to be. At the time I was a teacher and which I enjoyed, but I was just picturing, if I was a romance writer, if I was living in the city, kind of how would I want my life to be going. So I think in some ways it was like a romanticized fantasy of how I could imagine, my life could have gone if that's what I was doing. Um, so I guess, yeah, that's kind of how it started. Well, for the main character, anyways.
So Kara is a writer, which I love to read about writers. That there's just something, I don't know, it's kind of almost magical to get this inside insight into a character like that. But why was Kara a writer?
I think just like how you were saying, it's what I was interested to and what I was interested in. And I think when I started out, and then especially when I was editing it, I was trying to write the book that I wanted to read. And I also love to read about writers, so that's kind of what I set out to do.
Gotcha. Um, So you started writing chapter by chapter, like you mentioned. Did you have any idea? Well, and then the book that we're holding now is very different from that first thing that you wrote. But when you did you know how the story would end from the beginning?
No. Now, I had no idea what I was doing, honestly, because now when I write, I write very detailed outlines and character webs, and I just completely wrote by the seat of my pants back then. And I had no plan, no clue. I'd never taken a class in writing or anything like that. So I just went in totally inexperienced and unplanned.
So you get to the end of that initial writing project. It had to feel a sense of accomplishment, even if the book was not what it would become. There's a feeling of accomplishment when you get to the end of something and you complete it. It doesn't matter if it's in its final stage or not. You completed it. You told a complete whole story. What was that feeling like?
Oh, it felt really great. And I remember I printed it out actually in the campus. I was doing graduate school in the campus computer lab, and I had used like all of my free pages. Like you get a certain amount of pages that you're allowed to print per semester. So I had printed it out, and then just seeing it, this big stack of papers in front of me, and I just couldn't believe it. It felt amazing to do something that you thought, you'd never be able to do. And even if I knew it was nowhere near ready, that it wasn't at a publishable level, I was just so happy, that I set out to do it, and I did it.
What Death Taught Terence by Derek McFadden. Life is a journey. So is the afterlife. At the end of his life, Terence McDonald must discover its meaning, or he'll be banned from the afterlife forever, and his soul will cease to exist. Join Terence and those who love him on a poignant and unforgettable journey through a life at once wonderful and harrowing. Learn what Terence learned. See what Terence sees. By this provocative story's end, readers may even learn a thing or two about themselves. See why people are saying things like, Derek McFadden writes with an insight few can match. If you like the works of Mitch Albom, I think you'll find What Death Taught Terence a worthy addition to your library, and the reading of it a life-affirming journey. I found the story immediately immersive, and it stuck with me long after I finished. What Death Taught Terence by Derek McFadden, on sale now. Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web.
Did you know that it was going to take work to get it to a publishable state? What was your kind of what were your thoughts about what you had done and then what it would take to get it out to the world at that point?
I was very happy. I was happy that I got it done, but I knew it definitely wasn't at an industry standard, where it could get published. I think I queried like 2 people, like just to try it and just to see what would happen. And one of them was really nice. I got like a personalized rejection, which felt super special at the time.
Sure.
Just saying that she liked the concept and she liked the voice, but it wasn't there yet. So that was kind of the inspiration for me to kind of work on my craft. Right after that, I signed up for creative writing classes, and I really started to try to take it more seriously than I had taken it before.
So, as you said, this book is very different from that initial draft that you did.
Yeah.
What was the revision process like, and did you have, in anyone's guidance or opinions to help shape what your revisions became?
Yeah, after I queried it to those 2 people, I didn't work on it for a very long time because then I took a creative writing class, and the short stories that I had to write were always very like dialogue heavy. So then the instructor had told me, she goes, you should consider screenwriting. I think that's something that you would enjoy, just because I've always been very drawn to dialogue, and that was reflected in my stories. So then for years after that, I just did screenwriting, and I took classes and I joined a bunch of groups, and I learned a ton. Nothing, huge ever came of it. I was a finalist in a couple of contests. But in a way, I feel like veering in that direction really helped me, because I learned so much more about dialogue and about pacing. And I feel like then years later, when I came back and looked at this again, I applied what I had learned through screenwriting and then applied it to my novel.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the book. Kate Sullivan is an author and a successful author, and also a bookstagrammer, which is kind of a very 21st century kind of thing. And she's just kind of surrounded by all the good vibes of the writing community. But she's not, her personal life doesn't reflect her professional life. We'll just put it that way. When you started envisioning her, how did this character come to be? Like, were there any things that in any people, any feelings of your own life that informed this character, or kind of how did she start coming into her being?
I'm not really quite sure. I think when I was writing her, I wanted her to be confident. She's pretty satisfied with her life. I mean, she isn't in a relationship, but it doesn't bother her too much. She's pretty much happy, with her work and with her friends and her family. And, that piece of the puzzle is missing, but, it's not like she's dying for it or searching very heavily for it. So when she does wind up reconnecting, with Ryan, it's a surprise, and it brings up all these emotions in her, which I think she's surprised, because I think she considers herself to be pretty complete and pretty happy. So when she all of a sudden gets these feelings of unfinished business, it's a jolt to her system and to her otherwise pretty quiet life. And, while she has been mostly successful in her writing, here she is with a deadline, and for the first time in her life, she can't get there, and has writer's block. And then all of a sudden, this person who comes back into her life seems to be the one thing that can help her move forward and inspires her writing. And it's the one person that has thrown her life into a bit of a tailwind and that she would probably avoid if she could. And now she can't. And because she's having to spend time with him to get her book done, she's also forced to address their past and these new feelings that he's bringing up in her.
One of the most fun things about this book that I love so much is not only is this a story about a writer, but the work that she's doing at the moment, that Kara's doing, the book that she's working on, finds its way into this book. And can you talk a little bit about the decision to include her work in process and how that meshed into the rest of the story?
Sure. Well, I knew I wanted to pay, kind of my respects and show my love for the romance genre. And when I first started reading, it was all historical. So I've always loved it, always been drawn to it. And in the early draft of this book, I had included romance novels via her having these fantasies that kind of interrupt her daily life. Like something would be happening in her daily life, and she would then envision it in her head the way it would have happened if it was in a romance novel. So while I did like it and I thought it was funny, it kind of felt like it was just like the same joke being told over and over again throughout the book. So then years later, when I came back to it, I tried to think, how could I include historical romance in a way that doesn't feel like it's the same thing, that it feels like a continuous flowing, aspect of the book. And then that's how the historical novel, the romance excerpts came into play. And I also think that deep down, I probably have always dreamed of writing a historical romance, but I don't think I could ever do it. I don't think I will ever do it. So this was like my shot to write like a mini historical romance. So I just had to give it a go.
Well, and what a great way to do it. I mean, you can be as tongue in cheek as you want to, and with it, couched in the other story, it just really works. It's so fun to read those parts.
Glad.
So the idea of serendipity kind of works its way into a lot of romance stories and a lot of romantic comedy, especially. There's something about these two people that are meant to be together, and the all the things that they have to go through to become a couple. Was that something that you were thinking about when you're writing this, and the idea of these star-crossed lovers who once were and then not, and maybe ultimately are meant to be? Is that something that you thought about at all?
I don't know if I thought about I knew kind of that I wanted it to be a second chance. I always loved to read second chance romances, so I kind of had a feeling that was the direction that I was going to go in. And I always think it's so interesting to investigate, those past feelings and those past relationships. Like, of course, it's always wonderful and exciting to meet someone new. But I also think it's so intriguing to have met someone at some point in your life where you can then meet them down the road and you're a different person, but you're also a little bit of the same person. So you have these past feelings and new feelings that clash. And I really think it's interesting reading about characters who then have to face that and come to terms with that. So I always loved second chance, so I was excited to include that in here.
Absolutely. When you're writing a comedy, what's the self-editing process like? When you read back over what you've written, are you hard on yourself when looking at, does this joke land, or maybe not even a joke, but am I coming across as too snarky? It's a delicate thing to land comedy properly sometimes, because a character can either be goofy or snarky, if you want to go to the other extreme. But they're, dropping just the right amount of levity into a story, which kind of lets the reader off the hook a little bit when emotions run really high. A moment of levity can really balance out and keep the reader on this emotional roller coaster, which you kind of want them to. But Can you talk a little bit about comedy and kind of how you edit yourself to make sure that you're keeping the proper tone in your writing?
Yeah, I think it's definitely tricky, because you want it to feel natural, the comedy aspect, and you don't want it to feel forced. So I feel like for me, any of the comedy bits, it's more character driven and not situational. I feel like situational could be even more difficult. So I prefer to kind of do the comedy via the dialogue and just through two people talking. And when I'm editing it, I guess I guess you would call it like a smile test. Like if I read it and I'm smiling as I read it, then it's a good, then I know that I'll keep it in there and that it's good. But if I'm reading it and it just feels like I'm trying to be funny, then you're almost better off just not, if it's
Right.
funny, it'll come out naturally. You don't want to force it because then, readers can feel that and sense it. And then it takes away the joy of, what it's supposed to be doing.
From a hardcore pantser, as you described yourself in the beginning, to now someone who is a very meticulous planner,
Yes.
how has your writing process changed? And you talked about character sketches and things like that. What is that? What's the planning process like for you now?
Oh, I just feel like it takes away so much of the anxiety because with this one, with Talk Bookish to me, I really didn't have that much of an outline. Like I wrote the first one, by the seat of my pants. And then when I went back editing it, I had a little bit more of a plan. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I had like a list or two in my notebook. But then when it came time to write my second novel, I just sat down thinking I would do the exact same thing. It kind of worked the first time, let me see if I could do it again. And it just wasn't happening. And then when you have a deadline, then you have extra pressure because you think, okay, I don't have years to write this. I have a certain amount of time. So I was just getting so nervous. And then I said, let me just make an outline, like to make myself feel better. So then I started. And then I was like, okay, that feels good. Like, let me write a character web now. And then I broke down each character. And then I broke down each chapter. And I just kept going and going until I filled pages of this notebook all just with outlines and planning. So then when the time came to write, it was just like, okay, what am I writing today? And I just went and I looked at my outline and there was no anxiety, there was no nerves. I just sat down and did, like a brain dump of what I wanted to be in the chapter. And then I would go back, after my first pass and then fix that up. But to just get the words on the paper, which I feel like is the most intimidating part, the outline was very helpful for me to just get it down, so then I could edit it.
Yeah. Kate, I don't know if you've realized or not, but the last year has kind of been a dumpster fire for the world. And I cannot imagine, thinking about launching your debut novel in the midst of a pandemic and, worldwide shutdowns and all of that stuff. Thank God we're coming out of that now and the world is opening back up and, maybe we're seeing a semblance of normalcy returning. But what was that feeling like, knowing that you had this thing that you had worked on so hard and had put so much of yourself into, and then thinking about launching that into a world that can't go to bookstores?
Oh gosh, yes, dumpster fire. That is the perfect description. It was just like so much of the year. It was just you just don't know, and you're just so confused, and it was wild. I mean, I had COVID very early. Like I got it right.
So did I.
Me and my husband and son, we all got it at the same time. Before it was just coming out. Like what it was. Like we didn't even know. Basically when we had it, and then we were like, oh my goodness, we have every single one of these symptoms. So we were all sick for a bit, and then we were all home. My husband was working from home, I was home, and my son, golly, was he 3? I guess he had like just turned 3. So then I was with him and then trying to edit, and so it was just so hard trying to even find a window of time to work because my son is super active. So it was really just I'd have to get up early in the morning to get work done and then pray that he took a good nap. And then that was when I got some work done, and then just the end of the day. But, we got through it. And so now that we started thinking about the release and everything like that, I'm just so grateful, that I was able to get it done and we all came through it. And I'm just so happy that it's even coming out. The fact that it's a debut, I think it makes it just a little easier, just because I'm just so grateful that it's even happening, that like if it has to happen when I can't go to the bookstore, and that's fine. I'm just so happy that it's happening at all, and I'll take it, any way that I can get it. But like you said, we're all starting to come out of it now, and that's really nice. And I'm sure I'll be able to sneak to a bookstore and see it in the wild, which will be awesome.
That'll be so much fun, just taking that first photo of your book sitting on a shelf.
Oh, so surreal. I still don't feel like it. I still don't feel like a writer. I still don't feel like it's coming out. Maybe when I see it, it'll finally sink in.
We've done more than 1,100 episodes of this show, and every writer feels that way. I've not met a writer yet who felt like a writer. It's this thing that you always struggle with. It's such a weird thing.
Yes, it's like the real writers, and then like me, I'm over there.
Right.
I'm over there. They're over there. But who knows? Maybe it's better that way.
Right. When David Baldacci tells you that he wakes up every morning and just has to stare at the blank page, and you're like, okay, I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now, Kate?
Right now I'm editing my second novel. It is a standalone, but it does feature a character from Talk Bookish to me. And it all centers around the theater and the theater world, and it's set in London. So I'm very excited about that.
Nice. I can't wait to see what you do with that idea.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Talk Bookish to me is out, available everywhere now. When you're hearing this, you can grab it however you like to read books. If you want to, you can grab the Kindle edition, or if you want to hold the paper in your hand, go grab it to do that. Also, audiobook is available today as well. We're going to put links to all those places in the show notes of this episode where people can grab it quickly. Kate, but if people are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, where can they find you online?
They can find me on Instagram. That's probably where I am the most, at Kate Bromley Writes. You can visit my website, katebromley.com, and I'm also on Twitter.
And we will put links to those in the show notes as well. Kate, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I had such a blast.
Authors, if you're looking for a partner to help ensure that your book is the best it can possibly be, look no further than Pico's House. Crystal and her staff make a conscious effort to be critical yet courteous. They also strive to make the business side of things run smoothly so that you can rest easy knowing that your manuscript is in capable hands. Whether you need beta reading, developmental editing, a manuscript critique, line editing, copy editing, or proofreading, Pico's House is the one-stop shop for you. Check them out today at picoshouse.com to get started.